As a radical 29-year-old as of yesterday, and he was the lead builder for one of my tiny houses, and I want you guys to witness. He's done more than anyone else I know in exploring, advancing, and adopting natural, quote-unquote, equivalents of the standard construction materials that don't work for people's health and don't work for the world. So there's a lot that Myles can teach you about almost any natural building materials that you can think of. But I asked him to speak on ones that were kind of ready for market transfer.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of.
Hi, I'm Myles. Thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. There we go.
My presentation and actual slides are really specific so that you guys can have just like a little bit of like background to take home. But the presentations this morning kind of pulling together this idea of this conversation for this afternoon centered around how the work that I do mostly is in regard to health and equity a lot of the time, like promoting human health and equitable relationship to building an environment for everyone. And I hear a lot of amazing ideas in this room on the high-tech end of like what is, given all the potential that we humanly have, what's the best thing we can do right now. I want to take those ideas, boil them down to your 21st century plug-and-play kits that I can put back into the natural environment, that can then move from their natural homes or sheds environments back to, so that the home can return to the environment and that the technology can move on to its next purpose. Because at this point, with embedded energy and the stuff that we're creating technologies and systems that are lasting way longer than the lifespan of the materials of our homes that we're still living in and creating. And I don't necessarily believe that we should try and make everyone shouldn't necessarily have a house that's going to last as long as the platinum in your energy exchanger. So those materials and things just don't add up. So what I try and do mostly in my building is try and find somewhere in between the high-tech building stuff, like all the new materials coming out, and what is tried and tested over like 1,000 years. What seems to work on those. So if you take a look at that second slide, these are a bunch of the materials that I work with on the daily at this point. Anybody look at these materials and not know what any of them are? You guys know what these all are? This is awesome.
Never heard of charring.
Charring. I call it charring because most people can't pronounce that little word at the end, the words at the end there, because it's Japanese. The shoyu sugiban. It's one of the things I want to talk a little more about actually is the charring, because it's one of those materials that has sprung up really quickly. Probably first heard about shoyu sugiban in like 2006, and I think I was a little bit behind even then, because since 2006 I've spotted 4 new companies in North America, and a new one, like I guess a resurgence company pop up in Europe. But shoyu, or however you want to pronounce it, it means burnt cedar board. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we've been using also spruce and pines and redwood. But the concept of this material is to either take, most commonly being used as an exterior siding with the intention of reducing your need to paint and maintenance on that regard, and reduce the amount of embedded energy that's going into the wood, the treatment, the creation, the installation. Whereas you can take a board and then just naturally char it. You're looking at the next slide, the UMA slide, with just a little, remove some hydrogen, some oxygen, leave behind some char. It's resistant to UV, rot, pest, weather, fire resistance. The only thing you have to learn to love is the color black and various shades in between. I don't have the picture on here because it was a bad quality, but I just saw a new building up in Portland that just did shoyu sugiban for the full exterior siding around the outside. Decent eave protecting it, but that was that company that was working on that one, I think is I said their website. Charredwood.com is a Pacific Northwest company that just popped up to do some of that. But anyways, me and my friends got together and tried doing some of this as part of one of the first tiny house projects we were doing with Sean. He was like, let's try something without paint and make it last outside in Humboldt. And we laughed at it. Because everything rots in Humboldt. But we got together and we tried this, and it works really, really well. I won't even go, I'll let you guys peek through the history little bits if you want, and the methods. It's kind of just for you.
Slide 5.
Slide 5, where we get to some pretty pictures. These are all pictures of stuff that we did for it out at Tulifog at Sean's property, where we did both the traditional method of making a chimney using all of our on-site scraps. We used the rocket stove, like a little rocket stove barrel construction, to channel the hot gases to basically preheat the chimneys instead of lighting a little fire instead of each chimney and creating a wooden chimney to bring your creosote and stuff out the top. We just got a little rocket stove going with our construction scraps, and you just continue to get 4 or 5 of these chimneys ready, and you do 3 or 4 boards at a time. You just keep selecting them over and burning all your construction scrap as you're going, and then when you're done, throw some beans and lunch on there too. That was one of the things we took on for Sean's project. He's like, net zero energy, that's everything. And so we're looking at like, we already have this like huge tiny house with tiny little pile of scrap, and we're like, well, that too, pull that back into the building and burn it back down to make this. It
was awesome to see them barbecuing with the construction waste. And there's a story I want to quickly share. New York Times a number of years ago was a couple in which the wife was arrested because the husband had been poisoned by arsenic, and the thinking was that she'd done it. And in fact, they were just making a deck. But the guy was in the hospital with arsenic poisoning because he inhaled all of the pressure-treated wood. And he was full-on poison. It's not a happy thing. You die that way. So she was arrested. They did all the blood tests, and they figured out, oh, it's just as construction materials. But that story rocked my world. And then it's like, okay, there needs to be a better idea than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was when we found also the eco-bin.
There's the wood that they slowly heat or heat without atmosphere, and it modifies the lignin so that it's no longer digestible by fungus or animals or anything.
Is that similar to the simulator?
Slightly clarified.
Simulated, you should look at.
The chemist over there chatting.
Yeah. Anyways, what else I was going to get to is in those pretty pictures there, you can see some boards that get made into it, and then also those are some rafters that got made into it. Taking it back to a little more ancient of a process. So most companies these days, in order to produce this product, the few companies I've looked at, the way they're doing it is basically like steel conveyor belts over propane or natural gas burners, which I feel like is incredibly counterproductive to the point. You shouldn't be burning extra petroleum you're burning the same amount. I mean, if I was to do the embedded energy calculation on the whole thing, it would probably come out about even as if I would have just got the wood and painted it or stained it instead of charring it if you were going to use petroleum to char it. You should be using, waste scraps or other such wastes or gases to burn it to make it make sense. But the rafters were done in a pretty ancient way, like an old school way of doing it, because I don't know if anyone ever remembered this from way back in the day. If you ever lived, I grew up in the Central Valley, actually outside of Woodland, and water table would come up and stuff, and we had locust trees, and we'd take the black locust, which already takes a long time to rot, and we'd get a little fire going, and you'd roll the bottom of the post in the fire, and you'd torch the bottom of the post before you put it in the ground, right? Mm-hmm. And that was pressure treat for thousands of years, until more recently. So we took the same method with the rafters and just passed the rafters, like rolled the rafters back and forth over some hot burning coals, and then it gave us this nice charred rafter that we put in Sean's tiny bathroom. But in order to make it last in a super humid bathroom environment, brings us to our next slide. Our next old new product that's making a comeback, that's been around for centuries, coming back, is the linseed oil. The linseed oil I found pairs remarkably well with the shogu sugiban because you have this, depending on how burnt it is, this charred slough that kind of wants to break off, and you basically get this creosote dust that the linseed oil is super stoked to lock in and dry it to the surface. So for those rafters, you have this it's ashy, it's black to the touch. You rub a few coats of linseed oil on with a rag, and it just soaks the whole thing, fills all the cracks and all the pores that were unburnt with extra creosote dust, and then hardens it all in there. After a few days, you thumb it, and whatever, it doesn't black smudge on you anymore. I actually found that the shogusugiban, something about it accelerated the drying process of the linseed oil. Through the tiny house project with Shanzo, I was also introduced to the all-back linseed oil glazing product, and it's kind of like an old new in the sense that it's an older product that's been not changed at all, just remarketed. And it's basically chalk powder mixed back with linseed oil.
And you can buy it organic. Like
you
the
can
real
buy
thing.
it
Organic linseed oil.
Whiting, right? Whiting.
Be also aware that when I say linseed oil, I'm mostly speaking of non-food grade linseed oil, which the way I like it is heated for long periods of time and then cooled to begin the polymerization process. The modern stuff that you buy that's boiled linseed oil isn't actually boiled. Usually this has metal dust additives and stuff to help it dry, or has other petroleum-based solvents that are added to it. Don't get those ones. But, next slide.
Well, can I tell the quick story of the wood putty?
Go for it. Go for the wood putty. I'll get to that too.
Oh, if you can't tell your putty story, then you tell it.
Oh no, I'll have the
Alright, so Myles is super dubious about me asking to use that chalk and linseed oil putty because it comes as a solid hard block as opposed to DAP in a can which comes out soft and goopy and then the solvents evaporate and it hardens as it dries. So this stuff, solid block, pain in the butt, you have to heat it up and it turns goopy, you smoosh it on, and then it hardens. But there's no solvents. That is the finished coat. There isn't 2 weeks later of it hardening. It's done. And it lasts for decades. Not for 10 years or 20 years, but 50 years and 60 years. It is an incredibly stable material.
If you want to continue that story, if you want to flip 2 slides ahead really quick to the picture, another full picture slide that has a little bit of a window picture there, that's either one of the windows from your machine shop or another ancient Victorian window that, to restore it, popped all the panes out, cleaned the whole thing back up, pop it back in with the hot linseed oil backing. And when you put in this putty, while it's still warm, you put a little line on the glass and you paint over it with the linseed oil-based paint. And the linseed oil-based paint is basically just more mineral pigments and chalk powders mixed back with linseed oil. It accelerates the hardening of the putty and the paint together. So like if you have to apply the paint onto the putty while it's wet, which is great because I don't know if anyone's tried to glaze a window before and you're like waiting like 1 week, 2, 3 weeks for modern putties to harden before you can paint over them with latex paints. So that was kind of nice. It means like you can put this stuff in and within 48 hours you can install a full window and it doesn't mess it up.
Labor savings.
Labor savings, non-toxic, also putting that out there. Just in case you guys didn't know, linseed oil is this fancy name for flax oil. You could buy it at your local health food store, cold pressed. It says you can get cold pressed flax oil at your health food store. You can take that internally, which is actually really good for your skin and a lot of other things. I use it mostly for construction. Some more random little facts there about flax, linseed oil, and that other page got some chemical breakdowns, some whatnot. I'll let you guys read that. But you're looking at me like you're going to say something. And in those pictures is just what it looks like over wood. There's the bottom right corner of that almost last slide is it's like a temple type structure that I was working on with some friends down in Nicaragua, and the floor. One of my favorite uses of linseed oil is in earthen floors because it takes a nice hardened like plastered or earthen floor and just turns it into this. It's undescribable. It's a hard yet undentable but dentable bounce back material. Like you can take an earthen floor and you can like jam into it with a shoe and pick your foot up and watch it kind of come back a little bit. Like not from moisture, but just like done just right. It can be like a little springy, totally not dusty. That picture above it is also linseed oil when mixed with an earthen plaster.
Josh, just so you know, has an earthen floor in his beautiful new house.
Nice.
12-year-old.
12-year-old.
Yeah.
Not so new anymore.
It's beautiful. It looks like chocolate elephant skin.
Nice.
And it is
cool. Right now, my house is so cool. It is 106 degrees out there, and in the wintertime, it is so warm. It's amazing. There's no county planners here, right?
Former building official for the county, but he's all done with that job now.
Yeah, I'm a firefighter also up in Willow Creek. I don't know how smart my floor is really, but it would be so great if somebody could get it to code, and it's amazing. It's amazing to live on. Bare feet in the summer, bare feet in the winter.
And no air conditioner.
No air conditioner. Tiny little wood stove, but that's just because of modern.
Expansion contraction is minimal. Expansion contraction is pretty minimal. It works really well with hydronic floor heating too.
Yeah, we have hydronics in ours, and I used it the first Thanksgiving just so my parents would be comfortable, and it hasn't been used since. It's so good.
That's probably 20 grand you didn't need to spend.
Yeah, no, it was sweat equity. And then underneath it for insulation, we put Northern California lava rock. Underneath that.
That's a good base.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like you got a permit.
No. Yeah, that's basically it. Both the Shogun Liban and the linseed oil, both kind of fall in line with, bringing back to the beginning, are both things that are cheap, accessible, doable. You don't have to be an expert. They conform to indoor air quality. Actually, it can improve your indoor air quality in some cases. Basically, just trying to take older stuff and turn it back into the future. So that's what I got.